What if the war you're watching isn't the real war at all? What if the images, headlines, and urgent voices you hear are not just news but carefully crafted scripts meant to shape your perception? Every day, major media networks bombard us with footage of explosions, grieving families, political speeches, and maps filled with arrows and raid zones. But behind every image shown, there's an image that was left out. Behind every quote aired, there are 10 others that never reached your screen. This isn't just reporting, this is framing. The conflict between the United States, Iran, and Israel is complex, dangerous, and volatile. But the version of it that you consume, that's filtered, curated, engineered. You're not just witnessing a war through the news, you're witnessing a war through someone else's lens, and that lens isn't neutral. The opening salvos of modern warfare don't always come with the roar of jets or the flash of missiles. Sometimes, they arrive quietly in headlines, in voiceovers, in narrative choices. We're going to unpack that. In this video, we won't ask whether war is happening. We'll ask how war is being shown to you, and why. Because understanding what you're watching may be the only way to stop yourself from being used as a weapon of belief. And it all begins with the battlefield you never see. The battlefield you never see is the one inside your mind. In traditional wars, power is measured in troops, tanks, and missiles. But in the modern age, there's another battlefield quieter, more strategic, and far more influential. It's the war of perception, and the primary weapon, information. When a missile is launched, the world sees the blast. But long before that explosion reaches the ground, a second weapon has already been deployed. The narrative. The moment it hits your screen, it begins shaping your understanding: who's right, who's wrong, who's the aggressor, who's the victim. This isn't accidental, it's designed. Governments and media corporations don't just report on war, they participate in its storytelling. Through selective footage, emotional interviews, and strategic language, they build a version of reality that aligns with certain interests. And once enough people believe that version, it becomes truth by repetition. That's why this war, like many before it, isn't just being fought in the deserts of the Middle East. It's being fought in headlines, social media posts, and 24-hour news cycles. You're not just watching a conflict, you're experiencing the performance of one. So before you choose a side, ask yourself, who wrote the script? Because the next chapter of this war is already being written right now, on your screen. Every story we consume is the result of a choice: what to show, what to hide, and how to frame it. When you turn on the news and see footage of bombings, press conferences, or crying civilians, what you're really seeing is an edited version of reality. Not everything that happens
makes it to your screen, and what does appear is often stripped of context, compressed into sound bites, and delivered with urgency. That process is not neutral, it's narrative engineering. Consider this. When the United States launches an airstrike, the media often uses terms like precision attack or targeted operation. But when another country responds, the same media might call it retaliation, escalation, or even terrorism. Same action, different language, and that language shapes how we feel, who we sympathize with, who we fear, and who we trust. The power of the press isn't just in reporting facts, it's in determining which facts are worth reporting. That decision is inherently political. By choosing one quote over another, one image instead of 10, one angle out of thousands, the media crafts a story that feels objective, but is anything but. You're not just being informed, you're being directed toward a conclusion someone else has already written. And the emotional impact of that conclusion is no accident. What if the most effective weapon in war isn't a missile, but a feeling? Emotion is the invisible thread that binds a narrative to our beliefs, and media outlets know this better than anyone. When you see a child crying in the rubble, a mother clutching a lifeless son, or a soldier's funeral draped in silence, the intent isn't just to inform, it's to pull you in, stir something deep, and make you feel something before you can think. This isn't about truth, it's about impact. Through carefully selected imagery and music, through the tone of a reporter's voice, even through the camera angles, media doesn't just report conflicted designs, how you emotionally experience it. One side becomes a victim, the other becomes a threat, and soon, outrage replaces nuance. That outrage justifies action, justifies violence, justifies your support for measures you might otherwise question. And the cycle continues. But here's the catch. Emotion bypasses critical thinking. It silences doubt. It simplifies complexity into black and white. And once you're emotionally invested in a narrative, you're far less likely to challenge it. That's why emotion is weaponized, not to reveal truth, but to shut it down. Because the more you feel, the less you question. By now, you've felt the emotion. But behind the emotion lies something called a strategy. Media is not just a mirror of events. In times of war, it becomes an active participant. The timing of a headline, the sudden release of exclusive footage, the coordinated messaging across outlets, these are not coincidences. They are tactics. Governments and military agencies know this. In fact, many of them directly supply footage, briefings, and leaks to friendly journalists. These aren't random acts of transparency, the moves on a chessboard. The goal isn't always to inform the public. Sometimes it's to send a message to allies, intimidate enemies, or justify the next phase of
escalation. This transforms the media into an arm of statecraft. The battlefield extends beyond the front lines and into your living room, into your phone, into your perception of right and wrong. So when a news anchor looks into the camera and says, "We just received breaking footage," ask yourself why now, why this footage, and who benefits. Because in the age of psychological warfare, truth isn't the first casualty, it's the most valuable weapon. If traditional media sets the narrative, social media decides how far it spreads and how deeply it divides. Every scroll, every like, every share becomes part of a machine that learns what provokes you, and then it gives you more of it. Not more truth, more outrage, more conflict, more confirmation of what you already believe. The algorithm doesn't care about accuracy, it cares about engagement. And what engages the most? War, emotion, fear. So when a video of a missile strike goes viral, it doesn't go viral because it's important. It goes viral because it stirs something raw. And as it spreads, so does a version of the story carefully trimmed, emotionally loaded, often misleading. But here's the most dangerous part. The algorithm creates echo chambers. You're not seeing the whole war, you're seeing a curated loop that reinforces your bias. Meanwhile, someone else is trapped in their own loop, seeing the opposite. To people, same war, to completely different realities. This isn't just media manipulation, it's algorithmic manipulation. And it's invisible. No anchor, no journalist, no obvious bias, just cold code deciding what you believe. Because in the war for your mind, artificial intelligence is just another soldier. Fear isn't just a byproduct of war, it's a business model. Every moment of panic you feel, every surge of adrenaline during breaking news, is part of a machine that turns conflict into content, and content into cash. Major media outlets see war not just as news, but as an opportunity. Ratings spike, ad revenue climbs, clicks explode, and when people are afraid, they watch more, share more, believe more without asking questions. Many media conglomerates have direct ties to defense contractors, lobbyists, and political institutions. The same corporations that profit from war equipment also profit from the coverage that justifies its use. It's a perfect loop. Fear drives war, and war drives profit. So when you see dramatic headlines, urgent tickers, and non-stop coverage, understand that this is a product. A narrative designed not only to inform, but to keep you watching, clicking, consuming. Because when fear becomes profitable, peace becomes bad for business. And in this industry, the more terrified you are, the more valuable you become. So the question is no longer whether the media is biased, but rather, who's signing the checks. If all of this sounds too calculated to be true, remember, it's happened before. In 1990, a young Kuwaiti girl testified before the U.S. Congress, tearfully claiming that Iraqi soldiers were ripping babies from incubators. Her story fueled public outrage and was instrumental in justifying U.S. involvement in the Gulf War. Years later, it was revealed that she was the daughter of a Kuwaiti ambassador and her story had been orchestrated by a PR firm. It was a lie, but by the time it was exposed, the war had already begun. In 2003, major media outlets, including the New York Times, published reports claiming that Iraq possessed weapons of mass destruction. These stories, sourced from anonymous officials and never verified, created a global panic and paved the way for the invasion. No such weapons were ever found. These aren't fringe conspiracies, they're documented facts. And they show us a pattern. When governments want war, media becomes the megaphone. Every war has its narrative, every narrative has its architects, and every time the truth comes out, it's too late. So if the past teaches us anything, it's this. The media doesn't just get it wrong, they get it wrong when it matters most. You don't need to be a journalist to question the narrative, you just need the right tools. In a world flooded with curated images, emotional headlines, and algorithmic echo chambers, the first step to breaking free is awareness. Ask yourself, who is telling this story? What are they leaving out? Who benefits from this version of events? Start by comparing coverage from different sources, especially international ones. Al Jazeera, Deutsche Welle, RT, and independent outlets often present perspectives that Western mainstream media omits. It's not about finding the perfect source, it's about seeing the contrast. Next, verify images. Use tools like InVid or Google reverse image search to confirm if that bombing video is really from last night or from a different war. Years ago. Misinformation thrives on speed. Truth takes time. Watch out for emotional language. Words like slaughter, barbaric, or surgical strike aren't just descriptive, they're persuasive. They're meant to make you feel, not think. Finally, trust your discomfort. If something feels overly simplified or too convenient, it probably is. Real conflict is messy. Real truth is complicated. You don't have to accept the script you're given. You can write your own version, one rooted in skepticism, verification, and courage, because freedom of thought is the only defense in a war of perception. You've seen the missiles, you've heard the headlines, but now you understand there's another war unfolding, one without borders, one fought with images, scripts, algorithms, and fear. This war doesn't aim to take land, it aims to take minds. The media doesn't need to lie to manipulate. All it has to do is show you the right truth at the right time and hide the rest. That's not journalism, that's strategy. And in this battle, silence is just as loud as sound. But you're not powerless. You've already taken the first step, asking questions. And questions are dangerous to systems built on control. So the next time the news breaks, before you absorb it, stop, think, analyze. Who's speaking? Who's silent? And who profits from the story being told? Because the most powerful weapon in this war is you. If this video challenged the way you see the world, share it, speak up, and most of all, stay awake. There's another conflict coming. There always is. But now, you'll see it for what it really is, not just a war of weapons, but a war of words.